What's up guys, it's Z here, welcome back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck of the Day. Today I wanted to do an update on Shaddolls. I've been messing around with the deck quite a bit lately, and I feel like that in any kind of format, Shaddolls is a deck that can always adapt, and especially with all the fusion support that we've gotten throughout the past few years, the deck does have the tools to basically transform itself to what the meta needs it to be, and because of how a fan favorite this deck is, I wanted to do an update just for those who are trying to make the deck work and are looking for a way to survive in the current Tier 0 format that we have. So, before we begin with the video, if you enjoy the deck, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming content, and now let's get to the deck profile. So let's start with the Shaddoll Monsters. We have 2 copies of Wendy. She's the one that special summons from the deck either when flipped or when sent to the grave by a card effect. You don't really need to play too many copies of Shaddolls. Mainly, you're going to be sending them to the graveyard from your deck with Shaddoll Fusion. You mainly want to draw 1, so you can do some plays with L Shaddoll Fusion when going first or when you're trying to go for some extensive plays. But yeah, these cards can definitely break your hand when you draw too many of them, especially when you draw them without the spell cards. But thankfully now we have more fusion spells to kind of get access to them, so we can use more of their effects throughout a turn, not just rely on like using cards like Construct and other stuff to send more copies. We do have more ways to do that. We play 2 copies of Squamata, sending pretty much any Shaddoll card we want to the graveyard. You want to play 2 copies of this and Wendy just because they are the ones that are going to get access to Wendy, so you're going to get a monster on the field on top of everything you have, so you can go for follow-up, or you can get another piece to be able to go for more fusions. The rest are mainly one-offs, so you can use their effects whenever they're necessary. So we're playing 1 copy of Shaddoll Beast to draw a card. You're going to be setting this with Wendy sometimes when you know that you're going to be playing into a grindy matchup. So for example, if you're playing against Eldritch, setting a card like Shaddoll Beast is really good so you can get more cards. But if you're playing against Shizu Tear Laments, you're never going to get to the point where you're going to flip this card consistently to be able to get more cards into your hand, so you won't be able to send cards and summon cards that are going to get you more immediate effects. We're playing 1 copy of Shaddoll Dragon. This card pops back row and also can flip card and bounces back when it's flipped. It's a card that again you need it for some matchups. It's an easy side out against a lot of matchups, but you need it in the main deck just in case you play against a deck that does have traps or maybe even floodgates that will not allow you to play. We play 1 copy of Shaddoll Hedgehog. This is basically a 5th copy of Squamata or Wendy because it gives you access to a monster that you're going to need to get more fusion plays going. So you play basically 5 cards that get you access to another Shaddoll monster to be able to have more material. We're playing 1 copy of Ariel. This card is a card that in this particular format it's very tempting to play a 2nd copy of, but again the thing is you can get access to this card whenever you want, and with Bestials and being able to combine them with one of the new continuous spells that they have, you can kinda sometimes banish your light and dark monsters and get access to them. Unfortunately, Ariel is a water monster, so it's not a very easy to get it back, but again, if you use this card once, then you're going to be able to get enough advantage because your opponent's graveyard is very, very important when you're playing against these Tear Elements, and if they don't have the necessary pieces in the graveyard, if they mill, for example, another Tear Element with Havnish during your own turn, if they didn't have a graveyard set up beforehand, or if you put back all of the Tear Elements with Ariel, then they need a really good mill in order to be able to go for another fusion play. So this is why Ariel is a really good card to play right now. You can consider a 2nd copy, but again, I feel like against other matchups, she might be a little bit bricky, and even against Shizu Tear Laments, the problem is Mudora and Keldor are quick effects, so if you target them with this card, they can just easily chain them to be able to put back cards from your graveyard into the deck, so unfortunately it does not work so well against these Shizu stuff. And we're playing 1 copy of Shaddoll Falco. Falco is the grind machine of the deck. You need this card for the more grindy games, and this card can give you so much free advantage during the late game. Being able to recycle your Upcalones, your Constructs, being able to recycle this card on its own to get more free advantage means that you'll be able to get back your free big boss fusion monsters without needing to actually resolve a fusion spell, because during a grindier game, you might run out of resources, your opponent might have negates for your fusion spell, so you need to be able to get access to your fusion monsters with some other way, otherwise you're not going to be able to have any gas to be able to push through your opponent's board. Now, moving on to the more supplementary engines of the deck, we do of course play Branded, because it's basically the engine that you want to incorporate in any fusion type of deck that you're playing right now. So we're playing 2 copies of Fallen of Albaz. You don't need 3, not if you're not playing Branded Despia, you do not need a 3rd copy of Fallen of Albaz. Even then, sometimes the 3rd one doesn't come up as often as you would think, but yeah, in this particular deck, Branded Fusion offers so much that it's not even funny. Being able to trigger your Shaddoll monsters with Branded Fusion and also get access to your Libellion and going to your Mirror Jade gives you not only more disruption, but maybe sometimes you're missing a piece. You have a Shaddoll monster with a fusion spell but with nothing else to fuse with, so you can use your Branded Fusion to basically get access to another monster by sending a card like Hedgehog or a Wendy to the graveyard, so it helps so much on top of everything else. We're playing 1 copy of Aluber. Aluber is here for Branded Opening, and the cool thing about Branded Opening is that it does not discard for cost, so you can still activate your Shaddoll effects when you discard a card for Branded Opening. So on top of getting Aluber, which is going to search your branded fusion, you're triggering one of your Shaddoll effects. So yeah, this card is here just for the engine with opening. You do not really want to normal summon this card because a lot of the times when you're going second, normal summoning Albaz can be much better because you can use its super poly effect. And yeah, this card, it's not the worst card to draw because you don't play a lot of normal summons in the deck, but this is one deck you do not want to be normal summon reliant. Otherwise, you would be playing cards maybe like Gildogra or Mathematician, but you really don't want to waste a normal summon for the deck because you really need to be able to use your fusion spells, and maybe if you're relying too much on a normal summon and your opponent disrupts it, then you will not be able to do much. You need more spells than monsters in the deck. Now, we do play the Bystial Package as well. Now, Bystials are basically a necessity in pretty much anything you're playing right now because of how the format has shifted to a tier 0 format. Deck relies so much in the graveyard, but in this particular deck, the Bystial engine offers more because of the first card I'm going to show you in the engine. We play one copy of Bystial Lubellion. So this card, if you'll notice, it's the only light monster that we're playing in the deck, so it's the only target you can use to hard summon Construct unless you fuse a Construct with another monster to get another Construct, or maybe with an Albion, but in the main deck, it's the only light target we have. So this card is so amazing because this deck can send you to the graveyard so easily, either with Shaddoll Fusion or Branded Fusion, and you can get access to it back by tributing one of your level 6 or higher dragon monsters, which is going to be one of your Bystials, and while it's on the field, you can place a branded continuous spell or trap card from your deck on your field, so you're going to be using your branded regained with this effect to be able to amass more advantage. And also, the problem is that we're not playing more copies of this card, is that it's a Bystial, but it's not really a disruption, because you can discard it to search a Bystial, but if you're going second and you have this card in your hand, it's not an actual Bystial with a quick effect to be able to use to disrupt your opponent. So this is why this card can clog, but at one copy in this deck is so perfect because you can send it to the grave whenever you want, you can get access to it from your graveyard whenever you want, so it's a free body you can keep getting back, and also it's a card that's going to get you access to a spell card that is going to give more advantage. So we're playing this card, and of course, if this card gets banished, it's not the end of the world. It's not something necessary to do because the deck does not rely on Construct that much, not anymore. It used to. If you didn't have light targets before, Shadows were basically unplayable, but right now they have shifted to something else that you don't really need to summon Construct in order to be able to win because of all the other stuff you have in deck. And for the rest of the Bystials, we have of course 3 copies of Magnamut. I think these are pretty self-explanatory. If you're not playing Shadows, you're basically playing these no matter what kind of deck you're playing because that's how necessary they are in this particular format. And yeah, they have the effect to be able to special summon themselves by banishing a light or a dark monster from either graveyard. If your opponent has a monster, it's also a quick effect, and this searches you a dragon during the end phase. We have 3 copies of Druid's Worm, being able to send a card to the graveyard when it's sent from a field to the graveyard. And we also play 2 copies of Saronir because we did want more disruptions, because the deck does have more synergy with hand traps, I would say, than with other decks, just because if they're not doing anything hand trap wise, you can always use them for fusion material, so it's not like they're ever going to be dead. Even if you're playing against a deck that has no dark or light monsters in the graveyard whatsoever, you're still going to be able to use this fusion summon, so it's very likely that these cards are going to make some of use to you regardless of your matchup. And the last monster in the main deck is 1 copy of Yugioh, the Supreme Magical Force. I'm pretty sure everyone knows by now why this card is here. If you don't have access to this card, you can also play Raz Disciple, but this card covers more than Raz Disciple, so this is why if you have access to it, of course you're going to play it. But yeah, this card, everyone knows this combo by now. By using Branded Expulsion, you can give this card to your opponent in defense mode, and you basically lock them out of summoning anything, and they cannot do much, so you're going to OTK them back during their next turn. So yeah, it's something that the deck kinda needs because it doesn't have this unfair factor compared to some other of the decks right now, like for example Flounder is having the Barrier Statue and Shifter, and the Shizu tier of course being a Shizu tier, so we need to be able to incorporate something unfair to make the deck more viable in the tier 0 form. For the spell cards, we have 3 copies of Shaddoll Fusion. This is the best Shaddoll spell you have to play. When you're going second, your opponent is most likely going to have an extra deck monster on the field unless you're playing against Wanderies, but if you're not, then you can use this card to fuse from the deck, and you get so much advantage by sending a Shaddoll, you're sending your Lubellion, you get another send with Construct, you get 2 effects by using the effects, and if you also have a Druid's Worm or maybe a Magnamut on the field or even a Saronir, you can get back your Lubellion, use its effect, get back Branded Regain from the deck. All of that works so perfectly, and you can do that with just 1 Shaddoll Fusion. So yeah, this card, the amount of advantage you can amount this card is absolutely ridiculous. We play 2 copies of El Shaddoll Fusion. This card is more like an extender than anything else, because this card, being able to resolve it turn 1, doesn't feel the greatest, because using 3 cards to summon a fusion monster, especially when you're going first, it doesn't feel like you're plussing. When you're going second, you use this card, does maybe targeting effects, maybe to push for even more damage, or you can set this card and use it as a disruption during your opponent's turn. For example, if you have a window on the field and your opponent uses a card like Imperm or pretty much anything that can negate your window, you can chain this card and then summon another window, and they're basically screwed because they're still locked under window. So yeah, this card, it's not a 3 of def definitely. You can search it whenever you want by being able to send it to the grave with Squamata and then get it back one of your Shaddoll Monsters once they hit the grave. So again, it's a searchable card that you can use to be able to get more damage on the board and do some fancy plays. We play 3 copies of Branded Fusion. This is basically a card very similar in power with Shaddoll Fusion, especially in this deck, just because triggering your Shaddolls, getting Mirror Jade on the field to get more disruption, and also being able to use cards like Lubellion and Albion for targets for your Lubellion in the graveyard, be able to summon it. It feels so good being able to do all these plus plays with just one card. That has always been the beauty of Shaddolls. One card can lead into so many different effects, and now that we actually have an end goal in mind that we use to play cards with Floodgates and Mirror Jade along with everything else, and also have really good going second plays just because of how powerful Shaddoll Fusion is, means that the deck, even in this tier 0 format, does have something to offer. And if you're a fan of the deck and you like playing it with all the cards we have right now, you are still able to play this deck in a competitive level. We're playing 3 copies of Branded Opening. Again, this card does trigger your Shaddolls because it does not discard for cost, so not only are you going to get your Aluber on field, but you're also going to get one of your effects as well, so it's a really card. We're playing 1 copy of Branded Regain. This is the card that you're going to be setting from your field face, from your deck face up turn to your field with your Lubellion, because it's a card that as long as it gets to stick on the field for a couple turns, you can still get more advantage. So when a light or a dark monster is banished, you can target one of those monsters and put bottom of the deck and draw 1 card. So every turn when you're using a Bystial, you can basically use this card to get an extra draw. Or if you banish one of your opponent's monsters with Mirror Jade that is light or dark, you can again use this effect, draw another card. And also it has an effect that if your opponent summons a monster, you can target a Bystial monster in your graveyard and you special summon it. So you're going to be able to get more monsters back onto your field, which then you're going to be able to trigger their own field effects, which means that more advantage for you. So yeah, this card along with Lubellion gives you a small package that can give you more advantage and also help you push for game. We're playing 3 copies of Super Poly. In any other deck, I don't really like Super Poly in the main deck because there are so many lines of play tier elements can do to play around this card, only if you're relying on using only your opponent's monsters. But in Shaddolls and in Branded in general, you can use your own monsters with their own monsters without going next. So you can use a Shaddoll monster with one of their monsters to summon a Construct or a Winda, and then you can trigger all of the effects, or you can chain it with a Fallen of Albaz to be able to make a Mirror Jade or anything else like that. So yeah, this card is really good going second. It can also be a disruption. Like worst case scenario, you have nothing going in your hand. You can set a Shaddoll and a Fallen of Albaz and set this card, and then you can either go into a Winda or a Mirror Jade during your opponent's turn, so it can be used as disruption as well. We're playing 1 copy of Foolish Burial. Of course, this is Shaddolls. This card is basically a free effect, guarding on what you need. And for the trap cards, we play 1 copy of Shaddoll Schism. This is still a staple for Shaddolls. Even though it's a trap card, it's very easily searchable because you can send it to the grave, and then you're going to fuse away your Construct or your Winda, and then you can get it back. And also this card against a lot of matchups, it's really good because not only are you getting a fusion summon every single turn, you're also getting to send a monster your opponent controls to the grave, so it's really powerful. And we also play 1 copy of Branded Expulsion. This card is here for the Edo play. It's basically how you want to play your turn 1s if possible, because this is the only play that can guarantee give you a win, because it's a card that you can tribute a fusion monster to be able to get a monster from your graveyard, 1 on your own field, 1 on your opponent's field. You special summon Edo in defense mode or on their field during their own turn. They cannot switch it to attack mode to crash it because it was just summoned, so your opponent is basically locked under something that does not allow them to summon anything. So yeah, this card is the unfair part I was talking about before. For the extra deck, we play 2 copies of Construct. I mentioned that this deck does not really rely on Construct, and you can see now that before this card was a definite 3-of in any deck. This card was banned for anything else like a couple of years ago, but yeah, right now it's still a really broken card, but it's not a must that you need to get access to every single turn 1, otherwise your deck is not functioning. It's not like that anymore. It's still a good card, but it's a card that you're going to be using when you need more advantage. For example, turn 1, sometimes going into Wyndham can be much better, because if you get access to Construct and your opponent has a hand trap or something that doesn't let you get back access to your cards because Bestials are everywhere right now, then you're not going to be able to get access to your L Shaddoll Fusion, and you're not going to be able to get a Winda during your opponent's turn. So summoning Winda when you can is a lot safer, especially if you can use this for a second Shaddoll Fusion to go into a second copy of Winda in case your opponent can negate the first. We play 2 copies of Apkalon. We do play enough different attributes with 2 copies of Wendy and then 1 copy of Ariel to be able to go into this card, and going second, sometimes this card is much better than summoning Construct because it's a card that is going to bait interruption no matter what, because being able to send 2 Shaddoll monsters that are going to trigger and summoning this card in a chain link that is going to be chain link 1, so your opponent cannot completely interact with it unless they target it or something, means that you're going to be able to negate at least one of your opponent's interruptions. And of course, when it goes to the graveyard, it gives you more options than the other Shaddoll monsters because you can get access to anything from your deck, not just from your grave. We play 2 copies of Winda, still a great floodgate to this day. Tier elements do special summon a lot, and if you can get this on the field, especially if you chain it to a special summon effect, it means that your opponent is going to be locked for the entire turn, so you can get back your turn, and this deck does not have any problems whatsoever on TKing, and of course you can always out your own window with all those fusion spells to be able to spam a lot to get the win. For the branded monsters, we played 2 copies of Albion. This is the card that you're going to be needing to send Lubellion with, and the reason we're playing 2 is obviously because you send one with Mirror Jade to be able to get access to another branded fusion during the end phase. But again, if you don't have Shaddoll Fusion, and if you're not going second, you can't send Lubellion to the grave from your deck. Branded Fusion can do that too, so not only are you going to get access to your Mirror Jade, but you're going to get access to another monster that is going to keep coming back every single turn and also giving more cards. We play 1 copy of Lubellion. This is the card that lets you trigger your Shaddoll Monsters if you want to. You can always send a Dark Monster, which are the Shadows, to be able to get an extra effect. Yes, this card discards a card to be able to get access to Mirror Jade, but again, sometimes you need to maybe pop that one back row with Dragon or get a search with Hedgehog because you don't have any Shadows in the hand, but you do have an El Shaddoll Fusion, so this is why this card is here. We play 2 copies of Mirror Jade with 1 copy of Albion and 1 copy of Lubellion, and the second Lubellion being the one that is going, the second Albion being the one that is going to be sent to the graveyard. You can summon 2 copies of Mirror Jade. It's not happening too often as much you would think because you're not trying to get into a grind game. You do have tools to survive if you do, but you don't really want to get there. You want to lock them turn 1 with either Winda or Ido, and then OTK them during the third turn. So this is why you don't really summoning the second copy of Mirror Jade, but it's here just in case. And the rest of the extra deck is basically super poly targets that you can use only using your opponent's monsters, but of course you can use your monsters if necessary. So we play 1 copy of Starving Venom. We do play so many dark monsters, so if your opponent only has 1 dark monster, we can still always make this card. 1 copy of Dragostapelia, mainly against tier elements because of how many fusions they have. 1 copy of Garuda to cover most of the matchups, and 1 copy of Madragon to cover the matchups that Garuda doesn't cover. So yep, that's the deck, guys. Shadows, I feel like it's one of the most fun decks to play, and it makes you feel so rewarded when you make it work, because it's not a deck like Isizu Elements that grants you free win by just playing. It's a deck that you need to navigate correctly. You need playtest a lot in order to learn all the ins and outs of the deck, because it does have a lot of little tricks that you need to be able to accomplish throughout every single duel. So yeah, if you're a player that is trying to learn how to play the game, this is a deck I can definitely recommend because it's going to teach you a lot about the game. Or if you're a fan of the deck or a fan of difficult deck, then yeah, definitely this is a deck up, because it's just a deck that is going to make you feel so happy when you finally make it work. So yep, that's the deck, guys. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming content, and we'll see you next time.